Welcome back to our conversation with Matt Travis, the CEO of the Cyber Accreditation Body. Matt, I wanted to ask you about the CMMC ecosystem, as it's called, that of course the AB plays such a crucial role in overseeing. You mentioned at the top that you've been accrediting, the AB has been accrediting C3PAOs and CMMC certified assessors who work for the C3PAOs. Can you give us kind of a picture of where that is at, because that'll be so crucial to scaling this program?
Sure. Let me first put on my terminology police hat, just because the terminology CMMC can be very confounding. And so we have not yet accredited the C3POs. The first step is authorization, which means that they have proven to us that they meet the requirements to be a C3PO. We're getting ready to roll out the accreditation program under the ISO framework in part. And so more rigorous inspection of the C3POs will be occurring here at the beginning of 2026. The ecosystem is growing, which is great, and it includes a lot of different what we call cadres. So I'll start with those consultants. The other when you asked earlier about what's the messaging we want to get out to industry, there's help out there. This is not something you need to do on your own, nor should you do on your own. Whether it's developing in-house expertise or reaching out to the practitioner community, what we call the registered practitioners. These are individuals and organizations that are engaged in the program, attend all our meetings, follow everything in the news that you guys report, are aware of the policy issues, and really are in a good position to help implement the controls for level 2 and get you prepared for that assessment by the C3PO. And then we have all the assessors who are going to work for those C3POs who have to be, not only meet the requirements of taking 2 classes, the CCP class and the CCA class, and then passing, in both cases, high-stakes professional exams. These exams are almost 4 hours long, so this is a significant lift. In addition to meeting Tier 3 background investigation, having additional cybersecurity credentials per the 8140 manual within the department, and if you want to be a lead assessor, you have to have even greater experience. So it's a big lift, but that's to ensure the rigor and the quality of the assessments, that we have people who are really well trained and have that experience. That's the most important part of the ecosystem that we're trying to encourage folks to engage in. We have just under 600 CCAs, so the certified assessors, 580 when I checked this morning, and then about half of those are eligible to actually lead assessment teams. So we're probably going to need anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000. We've seen steady growth across the past year, especially now that the rules are coming into place. That's the most important part of the ecosystem that has to be grown, because we can have as many C3POs as we want. We currently have 83. There have been over 500 who have applied, and they themselves have to meet the CMMC Level 2 requirement by the DIBCAC, in addition to all the other requirements we put on them before they're authorized. But whether I have 83 C3POs or 500, they still need people. They need assessors, and that's the limiting factor. That's the long pole in the tent. I think CMMC, Justin, is a great way for folks to get engaged in cybersecurity. You don't necessarily have to come from a technical background initially. Obviously, CCP is at apprentice level where you could get started. And whether it's a full-time job or a side hustle, these assessors are going to be in demand. And so the compensation that goes with it, I think, is compelling. And so we are encouraging folks, if they haven't considered entering into the CMMC program, think about becoming an assessor. So watching those numbers, watching the numbers of the C3POs, the practitioners, we've had a great following really since our inception. We've got about 350 organizations, the registered practitioner organizations, to help defense contractors. And then individually, about 1,500 registered practitioners themselves. There are also instructors and approved training providers that are teaching the CMMC classes. There are content publishers who are authorized to publish CMMC training content. You don't hear too much about them as much, but they play an important role. All of those factors come together, all those communities come together to form the CMMC ecosystem that you mentioned.
Interesting. And I can imagine, the background investigations could be a bottleneck. What challenges do you see to scaling to those 2,000 to 3,000?
You hit it. It's the tier 3 for the most part. Initially, the bottleneck was rulemaking, because it's a non-trivial financial investment for someone to go through assessor training. Whether it's yourself or your company putting you through it, you've got to pay for the approved class. Then you have to pay the exam fee. And then for CCA, same thing, take an approved class, you pay for it. And they're about 4 to 5 day classes, generally either on person or online, and then take the exam. And then there was really no way to monetize that investment because assessments hadn't started. And so it wasn't surprising to me that we were seeing kind of meager growth in the assessor ranks. That's now changing. Now there is a financial incentive to become an assessor, in fact, a significant one. And then I think also the fact that that Tier 3 is a requirement, which was a policy decision, and following cybersecurity, Justin, there's always that trade-off between efficiency and security, right? And I think the department made a risk management decision that it wanted its assessors to have that Tier 3 background investigation. It's the same level of scrutiny that you get for a secret clearance, but for Tier 3, you're just not getting the clearance, you're just getting the background investigation. And so those things can take a while. The Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency does a great job, but that's not the only thing that they do. And so, it's been taking months for folks who have not had a previous clearance to get through it. And if it's taking longer than 6 months, then we're in a position to try to ask, what's the status. For folks who have had a lot of international travel, you've got family ties, financial ties that need to be looked at. Those can take longer. And so that has been the limiting factor in getting those assessors numbers. Even a steeper curve is the Tier 3. But again, I think when the department looked at this program, it's a security program. Sure. We need to make sure that those assessors who are going to be looking at companies around the world are known quantities and have been vetted properly.
That makes sense. And I imagine it's a good opportunity for folks maybe who are transitioning out of the military, who already have that secret clearance, or out of government work in the first place.
Absolutely. Yeah, the Skill Bridge program, which kind of transitions outgoing veterans from the department, has been a great resource for a number of the C3POs who can pull those folks out. They've got the clearance, get them to the CCA, CCP classes, and they can be working within weeks, if not months.
Well, we've talked about how companies, they may still be taking that wait and see approach, but certainly more and more folks are realizing that this is coming down the pipeline. What's that balance between, you mentioned how you had to convince folks to become assessors because there wasn't a financial incentive. Folks weren't seeking assessment for a long time because of rulemaking and all that. At some point there will be a spike. How do you prepare to meet that demand that's coming? You've got the great chicken sandwich finally out and folks know about it, but now they're going to be lining up around the corner.
I am concerned about the impending bow wave that I think we'll see in demand, and that's why we've been trying to encourage those defense contractors. Again, I'll emphasize, many of whom have had the requirements through the 7012 clause already in their contracts. So they've been on the hook to implement. They weren't on the hook to get certified. Now they are going to be. If you're ready to go, move now, because the more as we get into this phase one, and you start seeing, even if there's self-assessment requirements, some companies may want to just bring a C3PO just to validate, instead of doing a self-assessment yourself, hire a C3PO or an RPO to help you with that. There's a limited, right now, I know 83 C3POs, a lot of their dance cards are full into early next year, but not all of them. Some of the newer ones are still out there, soliciting business. But now's the time to move if you're ready, because once you start seeing, especially in year 2, when you see some of these big contracts, or even in year 1, as I think we'll see level 2, the requirement to have level 2, people are going to start racing to the checkout line, and there's going to be a wait. So move now if you're ready, and if you're not ready, get ready, because the sooner you do it, the easier it will be to get a slot.
Is it first in, first out, unless the department maybe says we need priority here?
Yeah, to its credit, the department opted for an industry solution, which I think was the right move. I think when you think about all the options, the certification by a private sector third party, I think hits all the right notes. But because of that, there is no mandatory scheduling protocols. They don't have to coordinate with us before they schedule an assessment. Any C3PO can schedule their own assessment at the mutual convenience of them and their defense contractor clients. Do we envision potential scenario in the future where if there's a priority procurement coming out with level 2 requirements that the department might ask for headline privileges if there was a thought that the likely pool of RFP respondents hadn't been certified? Maybe, and I think, again, the more we grow more C3POs, that'll be easier to accommodate. But right now, there are no mechanisms to mandate when a C3PO can or can't do an assessment.
And as far as just how industry is approaching it, are you seeing prime contractors come along with their supply chain in tow saying, hey, guys, here we go?
I think that's a big part, Justin, of why we've seen the demand signal that we've seen in this year prior to the the 48 rule, making this a mandatory requirement. Certainly some of the big primes, I've heard them myself, are telling I spoke to one prime contractor their entire supply chain at an online conference 2 weeks ago. And the session before I spoke was one of their officials essentially giving the directive, if you want to continue to be a subcontractor to us, you will move now and get assessed because 6 months from now we're going to check to see who's certified or not. I think that's going to be as big a prime mover as some of these, as we see contract by contract come out with requirements. If you've had a relationship with a prime contractor for years successfully, and now you realize that relationship is threatened to the fact that you haven't implemented and gotten your certification, that's not smart business. So I think the primes play a tremendous role in this, and I think it's for those who have been very vocal, I think it reflects well on their leadership. They not only talk the talk in supporting the department and the warfighter, but now they're walking the walk and making sure that they're leading by example, and that's just critical.
Yeah. Well, and in any program like this, where of course there's a lot of money at stake, there is the opportunity for conflicts of interest and for ethical violations and for folks who want to come in, snake oil salesmen, what have you. What role does the cyber accreditation body kind of play in policing its own ecosystem? And then where does the department and perhaps others step in when something crosses the line?
We not only play a central role, I would say we play the role in making sure that integrity and confidence is instilled through the program, and that any of that type of behavior is investigated efficiently, and that we take action. We enjoy significant authorities through the 48 or the 32 CFR rule. We publish and police the Code of Professional Conduct. When I talk about those three things that we have to ensure exist, the competency of the assessors, the consistency of the assessments, the impartiality, if you really press me, that is the most important. Because if individual assessors or C3POs are playing fast and loose with the rules, turning a blind eye to those conflict of interest prohibitions, then nothing will upend this program quicker than that. So it's probably the most important thing that we do. We rely on largely kind of self-policing. We can't be everywhere. And so whether it's a whistleblower within a C3PO or someone who sees something that doesn't look right, we've got a complaint process that we intake complaints, see if they're valid under our ISO policy, and then we have the responsibility to open an inquiry and report that to the department, and ultimately decide if there's been a violation and what the remedy is or what the potential penalty is. Early on, I would call have been some honest mistakes of some advertising and marketing that's a little aggressive. In CMMC, it's not just that you don't have conflicts of interest or any conflicts have been disclosed and they either mitigated or avoided. I'll come back to that. But also that you're being a responsible actor and you're not exaggerating what you can do for clients, that you guarantee your certification or we can do it in a day. Those kind of hyperbolic assertions we police. But to your point, most importantly, it's the conflict of interest. The one that people look at most frequently is that line between consulting and certifying. C3POs, by nature of their subject matter expertise, are certainly free to conduct advisory services and provide advice and consulting to defense contractors on how they implement the CMMC standard. I think the RPOs are a better choice for those, but nothing prohibits the C3PO from doing that. But once you do that, you're now conflicted out of certifying that same company for 3 years. And so we're going to look at that very closely, not just the organization of the C3PO, but any assessors who might be contract assessors as well. So that's got to be looked at. But also there are other types of conflicts. There are familial conflicts. If you're an assessor and your brother-in-law is the deputy CISO at the defense contractor, well then that C3PO might still be able to do the assessment, but that individual assessor would have to be recused off the team. Financial conflicts of interest, other types of conflicts. We list those in the Code of Professional Conduct. It's up to the C3PO to police their own impartiality program, and then we oversee and kind of police how they police themselves. So that's the role. Nothing is more important than that, because if people think that there is an inside game or that some folks have a fast track, skirting the rules or getting favorable treatment, this won't work, and then we won't exist. So it's critically important that we do this effectively.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that overview. I mean, you mentioned something early on that I wanted to come back to. Just some defense contractors are now getting their own in-house expertise. Folks, I think you said CCAs certified for kind of like themselves. How does that work just in terms of what they are allowed and not allowed to do, going down the supply chain or whatever else?
So ideally, we hope that all the CCAs work for C3POs because, again, that capacity we're trying to build. And if you want to build in-house expertise, I think the practitioner program, which focuses on the implementation. But I get it why some companies might want to do, hey, we want to do our own internal shorts and shoulder pads assessment or self-assessment, and we'd like to have an employee who's actually certified to assess. Completely get that. The continuing education program for assessors will be rolled out by the CAECO probably into next year. I imagine, I'm not speaking for the CAECO because that's really separate, even though it's under our corporate family, we don't touch the policy of the CAECO. There will likely be at some point a requirement that assessors must do some number of certification assessments to maintain their certification. So at some point, even if it's an in-house CCA, I anticipate there'll be a requirement for them to go work for a C3PO and do some assessments. But as long as before any assessment at level 2, there's a requirement for the C3PO itself corporately and for all its assessors to disclose any conflict of interest. And there's nothing wrong with having a conflict of interest. Active professionals know a lot of people. They've had previous jobs. They have friends and family. They have financial interests. And there's nothing wrong or sinister about having a conflict. They must be disclosed. That's the duty. That's primary duty, disclose it. And then the C3PO has to decide, can this conflict be mitigated? Can I firewall this person off, recuse them, do something where that conflict does not compromise the impartiality of the assessment? And if I can't, well, then I have to avoid the conflict. I either can't do that certification assessment for that defense contractor, or I got to swap out the people depending on what the conflict is. So that's really the key. But just being a CCA, an in-house subject matter expertise, it shouldn't really affect your freedom of movement out into the ecosystem.
Okay. All right. Well, fantastic. I want to take a step back because we've been talking about the ins and outs of this program, and we've really touched on the big picture here, which I think folks are all aware of. Securing this data is really important. That's why the Defense Department is doing it in the first place. And there were a lot of companies that obviously were saying that they were fully compliant with the NIST controls and weren't. And we saw some incidents over the years that led to data exfiltration. I can imagine that the Defense Department is not the only agency in government that's interested in ensuring their supply chains are secure. I know they aren't, but I think for a long time there's been this idea of will they or won't they? Will the rest of the federal government adopt CMMC, or will they go their own track? I know we saw the FAR CUI rule roll out earlier this year. I imagine you'll want to touch on that, but where is that conversation at in your view?
Well, I think your first point, Justin, was completely important to reemphasize that people talk about compliance, what do we need to do, what's the checklist? It really is about conforming to a standard that the department has set for its business partners. These assessments are not like Navy engineering inspections I used to have to suffer through. It is assessors to assess, are you meeting the standard that the department and NIST have set up? That might sound like a nuance, but it's important because ultimately, to the bigger picture that you speak of, it is to ensure that the supply chain is secure and that there is a reasonable expectation that when I let a contract, starting with the Department of Defense, Department of War, but likely, I think, my own opinion, not speaking for the government, you will see other departments, agencies wanting to manage their own digital risk in a similar manner. When you think about the different ways that the government can try to manage risk in this area, I think of 5 doors. And some of them aren't viable, right? The first door would be, we're not going to do anything. We're just going to let the contractors do what they want, and we'll live and let die. And it's clear that we've had our lunch money stolen. That's not an option. And then on the other side, door number 5 of don't do contracting. Well, that's not viable either because the government in this town, as you well know, couldn't do what it does without the support of industry. So then you have either self-assessment, and the Pentagon tried that, and it didn't work. And I don't think it would work for any other department or agency. door number 4 is, well, let's just hire a fleet of government inspectors. And but this is meat inspection, and it's not tax. I mean, this is cybersecurity. It's a fast-moving industry. You need private sector expertise. So that middle door of having a third-party private sector certification body assess and validate your cybersecurity disposition, I think is the wave of the future. And whether it's DHS, Department of Energy, NASA, anyone who has CUI that needs to be protected, I anticipate as CMMC kind of comes into its own, prices come down naturally, which they will the more competition we have. The requirements become more clear. You will see other departments and agencies come in the wake. We know that other countries are already joining the CMMC program because it's an international program by design. And I'm spending an increasing amount of time talking to delegations from other nations about how to enter in the CMMC program. We've had interest from state and local governments about, hey, how can we potentially participate at a similar level? So whether it's called the CMMC or something else, this ecosystem exists at no cost to serve any other department and agency in the civilian executive branch. You might have to tweak the requirements. If it's a DHS assessment, maybe it doesn't require all the things a DoD assessment might require, but it's likely going to be similar. And you mentioned that FAR CUI rule, which had been dormant for years and now is back up in the regulatory radar. I think it's going to be very interesting several years. I think a lot of folks are going to be looking to see, is CMMC working as kind of designed? Is it successful? If it is, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't see more coming into the fold. And that's what I would like to see, because I think it's an important program for what you said at that big picture. Supply chains need to be secured. It is a national security program. It's not just some regulatory program that the government is doing just because they can do it.
Right. Well, and you alluded to it. I mean, what do you think, what markers of success do you think CMMC needs to show with its work for the Defense Department to scale more broadly? Because I think we've seen DHS a few years ago took a look at CMMC and said, it's not for us right now, we'd like to go our own route. What markers of success, you mentioned cost perhaps coming down, but what else do you think you need to show? So
scale, I think efficiency and trust, if it's quite as good, right? Yeah. So if companies are getting certified, and we have about 500 now, and then we had about 200 more pre-rule program called as, joint surveillance. Mm-hmm. So probably 700 companies have actually gotten the level 2 validated. I think showing those increasing growth in numbers and where there might be violations or bad actors, that we are filling our role in policing that effectively. And then ideally, CMMC is not going to prevent the Chinese from exfiltrating data. It's going to make it a lot harder. It's going to put a burden on adversaries that they're going to have to work harder to compromise defense contractors much more easily. So I think ultimately over time that we feel that the department feels more confident in the security of its supply chain. That's not really something that can be measured. So until then, it's going to be, how many assessments have occurred, how many certifications, how many people are out there, and is there a wait time? Like our companies, like I need to get certified. My contract's option year's coming up. I can't get a slot for 9 months. Well, that's not what we want to see. We want to see efficiency in this market. We want to see impartiality, and ultimately we want to feel and be able to, the department to feel that the security objectives are being attained.
Gotcha. All right. Well, in the time we have left, any closing thoughts? Just as CMMC, as we mentioned at the top, is officially official, it's effective as a rule, and now the phased implementation is starting, but anything that we haven't touched on that you think is important to mention? I just kind of mentioned it. I think people don't realize the international aspect of this program. The department made a decision that reciprocity wasn't appropriate. We have the United States Department of War has an industrial base that supports our war fighters. Some of that support comes from other countries and other workers making innovative technologies and providing valuable services. We shouldn't have a separate security standard for them that we do for our own US-based industry. And so it's a global standard to support the American defense industrial base. You're going to see assessors and C3POs from other countries, other languages being part of this, and you will truly have a global CMMC ecosystem over the coming years, which I think even makes it more important that we get it right in these early days to show confidence in it.
So that point I'd like to reemphasize, and then just what I said earlier, get help. No defense contractor should go at this alone. You are putting too much at risk in your business. There's expertise out there that's affordable and at least can get you started. And I would encourage folks to look at our marketplace, attend our town halls to get more information on what that really is.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking this time.
Thank you, Justin. Great to be here.
Again, I'd like to thank today's guest. Matt Travis is the CEO of the Cyber Accreditation Body. I'm Justin Doubleday, and you're watching Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more on the Risk and Compliance Exchange.